If you hold only 1,000 XRP, you need to hear this, because something has begun behind the scenes that most people will not recognize until after the move is already well underway. It is not loud, it is not dramatic, and it is definitely not driven by retail emotion. It is something far more powerful. A quiet, systemic repricing that starts long before the chart reflects it. And according to a sovereign wealth fund macro strategist, the shift is not coming. It has already started. Welcome back to Matrix Millionaire. Before we go deeper, hit like so more XRP holders get this information. Subscribe if you refuse to be caught off guard by the next phase, and drop a comment telling me how long you have been in the XRP ecosystem. And as always, this video is informational only, not financial advice. Markets move quickly, crypto can be volatile, and you must make your own decisions. Right now, XRP sits in the low double-digit cent range. Quiet, compressed, almost emotionless. Retail sees boredom. They see stagnation. They see a chart that looks like it has no pulse. But the strategist explained that this calm is exactly how every institutional repricing phase begins. He said that before sovereign funds reallocate liquidity, before bond desks reposition, before cross-border settlement engines shift into new rails, the market always goes silent. Volatility dries up. Sell-side depth thins. Volume becomes deceptive. It is the same signature every time. This is not a retail pattern. It is an institutional one. The strategist described XRP's current moment as liquidity migration disguised as stillness, a phrase so precise that it explains everything we've been seeing. The tight range, the clustering wallets, the on-chain movement into long-term storage, the shrinking visible supply, and Ripple's complete silence. This is not inactivity. It is coordination. And coordination always happens quietly. If you hold 1,000 XRP, understand that this period is not meant to excite you. It is meant to hide the transition. Institutions do not want attention as they reposition. They prefer an environment where retail is asleep, bored, distracted, or disillusioned. That is the phase where sovereign funds accumulate and reposition, because they know what the public does not. Quiet price action is the prelude to structural repricing. The strategist explained that the reason the repricing has already begun is because the global settlement system is being squeezed from every angle. Tokenization is scaling. Cross-border friction is rising. Treasury markets are unstable. Bond liquidity is thinning. Gold correlations are breaking. Payment corridors need faster rails. And the legacy infrastructure simply cannot handle what is coming next. This is exactly the environment where liquidity migrates into neutral bridge assets. Not for hype, not for speculation, but for survival. Sovereign funds do not chase charts. They move ahead of necessity. And right now, the necessity is building. He said there are only two phases in major financial transitions: the visible transition and the invisible transition. Retail only sees the first. Institutions move during the second. What we are in right now is the invisible transition, the phase where the repricing begins quietly, long before retail awareness returns. It is the window where charts flatten out and liquidity shifts in silence. And once the visible phase begins, it never feels fair. It never feels slow. It never feels early, because the invisible work was already done. If you hold 1,000 XRP, you are positioned inside that invisible phase. You are holding something the world has not yet priced correctly. And while the chart sleeps, the system underneath it is not sleeping at all. It is rewiring. The strategist from the Sovereign Wealth Fund explains something that most retail investors never hear, because it is the kind of truth that only appears behind closed doors, inside liquidity meetings, and inside briefing rooms where trillions of dollars of global capital are allocated. He said that quiet repricing does not happen when the market is loud. It happens when the system underneath the market is changing faster than the price can reflect. And that is exactly where XRP sits right now. He explained the mechanism like this. Every financial system has a pressure point, a point where the old rails cannot move fast enough, cannot settle cheap enough, and cannot carry the weight of tokenized value. Once that point is reached, money does not flow. It seeks a new path. And the moment that path becomes necessary, settlement assets begin repricing, even if the public does not see it yet. For XRP, that mechanism begins with liquidity migration. The strategist compared it to water seeping into new cracks before a dam breaks. First it is a trickle, then it becomes a flow, then it becomes a force that can no longer be stopped. Right now, XRP is in the trickle stage. small but consistent movements of liquidity off exchanges, deeper accumulation into dormant wallets, and clustering behavior in sovereign and institutional regions. This is not random, and it is not retail. It is the preparation phase of a system shifting its settlement architecture. He said that sovereign funds move first because they do not chase returns. They chase stability, efficiency, and long-term functionality. When they see tokenization speeding up, when they see treasury markets under stress, when they see cross-border friction rising, they do not wait for the chart to move. They move ahead of necessity. And that quiet front-running is what begins the repricing, long before retail sees anything. XRP's chart right now reflects confusion, boredom, impatience. But underneath that chart, the liquidity equation is tightening. He explained that once settlement corridors begin their final stage of preparation, the supply available to the public contracts, and the asset begins its repricing silently, not through spikes, but through structural shifts in liquidity distribution. This is why 1000 XRP matters more now than it did months ago, because utility-driven repricing is not emotional, it is mathematical. Once demand enters a fixed supply system, the repricing is forced, not requested. And this forced repricing begins with silence. Always silence. Look closely. Volume is low, but liquidity is migrating. Price is still, but depth is thinning. Social sentiment is weak, but accumulation is increasing. The strategist said these three signs together mark the early phase of every sovereign-led repricing cycle. The markets that appear the deadest on the surface are often the markets being repositioned in the shadows. He said the most important thing is understanding that the system is already shifting. The repricing has begun where all real repricing begins, in the institutional layer, not the retail layer. Retail will only understand what happened once the next phase starts, and the chart suddenly reflects the liquidity that has already moved. But you, holding 1000 XRP, you are not waiting for the chart to reveal it. You are watching the system reveal it. You are in the invisible phase. The phase where the quietest moments conceal the largest transitions. The strategist said something that stayed with me long after the conversation ended. He said, "By the time the public realizes the repricing has begun, the repricing is already over." That single sentence explains why XRP looks the way it does right now. Silent, forgotten, underestimated, and yet more loaded with institutional activity than at any time in recent memory. This is the part retail never understands. Markets do not move when people are watching. They move when people stop paying attention. Look around you. Retail isn't excited. Social media isn't buzzing. Influencers aren't celebrating. Even many long-term holders feel numb. And yet, behind the scenes, every indicator of institutional preparation is flashing. Wallets that have been inactive for years are accumulating. Supply that used to move freely is tightening. Liquidity that once flowed on exchanges is being pulled into long-term storage. These are not the actions of small traders. These are the steps of large, coordinated players, positioning themselves before the next phase of the financial system emerges. This is what the strategist meant by quiet repricing. A system like XRP does not explode out of nowhere. It winds up. It coils. It compresses. It absorbs liquidity until the supply available to the public becomes thin enough that the next wave of demand forces a new price range. And that forced repricing does not begin during hype. It begins during moments like this, when you least expect it, when retail assumes nothing is happening, when the market feels frozen. But nothing is frozen. The system underneath the chart is in motion. Tokenized assets are scaling. Settlement rails are being tested. Cross-border networks are preparing for activation. Treasury inefficiencies are screaming for faster solutions. And sovereign funds have begun the earliest and quietest phase of reallocation into assets that can function inside the digital settlement model. If you hold 1000 XRP, you are not holding a lottery ticket. You are holding something that is being quietly repriced by the very institutions that will eventually rely on it. This is a moment retail will only understand in hindsight, after the move is already well underway. But you are hearing it now, before the chart reveals it, before the headlines explain it, before the world wakes up to it. This is the difference between being late and being positioned. You are not on the outside of this transition. You are inside it. You are sitting in the silent phase that always comes before the visible phase. And once the visible phase begins, it will not feel gradual. It will feel instant. But you will know it was never instant at all. It started right here, in the quiet. If you watch this entire video to the end, I want you to type awakened in the comments right now. That one word tells me you see what others don't. It tells me you understand the difference between chart watching and system watching. And it tells the algorithm that you are one of the few who actually stayed until the final second. Tap like to push this message to more XRP holders. Subscribe to Matrix Millionaire so you never miss the signals hidden beneath the surface. And comment awakened to let me know you're not asleep during the most important quiet phase XRP has seen in years. The repricing has begun. The world just hasn't realized it yet.